So then I come to order, please. I'm gonna begin this, although Ann will pick up part and Carrie as chairs of the SU and Vernon.
Thank you.
So having to do with the SD, any board member may request that any item may be removed from the, let me begin with a hybrid statement. Okay, the meeting of these three boards will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely, and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt public participation. Therefore, it's important to note that open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and the agendas. If there is a problem, please let someone know in the space by email or text. We will do our very best to reconnect you. Nevertheless, this meeting will continue. Having to do with the SD, any board member, and this is consent agenda, any board member, when we come to the consent agenda, may request that an item be removed if it warrants further discussion. Please make the request either at this time or before the consent agenda. I do have an amendment to our consent agenda, and that is the minutes are listed as May 7. They're listed, I do believe, as May.
They are, May 7th.
And it should be May 27. So I'm assuming that board members are up to date with the minutes, and I don't see any objections at this point, so please make that correction. It should be May 27.
Since it's still the beginning of the agenda, I guess Carrie and I.
Yes, okay.
A brief amendment to the SU agenda. This evening, we will only be approving our warrants and payrolls because they aren't on our agenda for Wednesday. Everything else will wait till Wednesday.
And on Vernon, we're going to move what was going to be our 5 o'clock meeting to now, and Vernon will approve their warrants and payroll and minutes only. We'll take our scheduling offline.
Okay. Public comment on non-agenda items. The SD statement is as follows. This is to provide the public the opportunity to speak to agenda items. To speak to non-agenda items. This is a time for the board to listen and to take notes. It is not a time for the board to respond to comments or engage in dialogue with the public. If appropriate, board and administration will take next steps forward. So, public comment on non-agenda items for all three boards. All right, I don't see any hands up online. So I'm going to move to the WSESD approval of the consent agenda as presented in the minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? Oh, there is no discussion at this point. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, consent agenda is approved. Are you on?
Yeah, I think that's the order they were in. Yeah, I just had to run through.
Yeah.
So I would entertain a motion to approve the WSESU minutes and warrants and payrolls as enumerated in the agenda.
So,
Thank you. There is no discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Warrants and payrolls are approved. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, on to Vernon. Is there a motion to approve our minutes of May 12th?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? And then warrants and payroll of May 9th and May 23rd, as well as payroll 22 and payroll 23. Is there a motion?
Make a motion.
Thank you, Kat. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're good.
Okay, we are up to administrative report.
Okay, we'll start with some resignations and new hires. We have 5 resignations and 11 new hires. I'll start with the resignations. April Barnes, Doreen Burke, Katarina Mazer, Lauren Reedy, and David Spanion.
I move to accept those resignations with regret.
Second.
I'm sorry, I'm the chair, yes. Is there any discussion?
Which board is that for?
This is for the
The board? Okay.
SD,
Okay.
yes, this is for the SD board, yes. Confusing,
Yes.
okay. All those in favor with profound regret, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you.
All right, for new hires, I have 9 new hires in the SD and 2 new hires for the SU. So we'll start with the SD new hires. Rebecca Potter, Donald Lee Golden Coop, Marcel Murdoch, Mary Pinnaker, Isabel Stack, Delia Kramer, Paula King, Lorraine Reedy, and Ashley Kane.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you.
We can do the SU on Wednesday.
Wait for 1 second. All right, well, given that, the bulk of our presentation tonight is our 3rd and final summit presentation of the year. So a number of us are going to be participating and presenting tonight's work, data and accomplishments. And as I shared in February, we have now rehearsed this as a group. So there may be some hiccups along the way, but we'll try to be as efficient as possible as we work through the presentation. There's about 50 slides. I know some feedback from February was great. It was very long. So we're going to try to be concise while also not, leaving out the intention of what we're trying to share tonight. So I have prepared a note catcher. There's 30 copies, so I'd say preference should go to board members, but then others, if you would be interested in using one, take notes, feel free to grab them. So it's organized in 6 sections, 3 in the front, 3 in the back, and which matches our presentation, which there are 6 sections of the presentation. So we'll start these with Anne, and we can work them around. So before we really jump into the meat of tonight's presentation, I do want to start with just an overwhelming thank you for everybody being here tonight. This concept of the summit approach and bringing all 3 boards together with the full administrative team. It's been a bit of a heavy lift, but I think it says a lot to have everybody in this room together in the way that we're gathered tonight, like we did in September and in February. So, first and foremost, if you just look around the room, we have all these tremendous leaders who have one thing in common, which is essentially, let's do everything we can to support all of our students in pre-K through 12. And I think it's inspirational to see so many people who routinely show up for late night meetings, discuss, debate, but essentially work with each other to put in place the best possible school system that we can, knowing that we've never climbed the mountain. We're always moving forward and trying to better ourselves. Each school year, each school board meeting, each leadership meeting. So, never want to give an impression that we're content with what we've accomplished this school year, because we're not, and we need to do more, and we will next year. And that is a continuous pattern that we'll continue to embrace. So thank you, all of you, for your leadership and what you bring to the table each and every day for our school system. That being said, as we kick off tonight's presentation, you can see the 6 sections of tonight's presentation and how we've organized this. So kind of an intro with our current CIP, some models of how we've been stewards of the CIP throughout the year. Really an overview on progress and a look at data. We're going to spend some time looking at professional development that we've engaged in throughout the school year, also tied to data. We have some inspirational stories to tell this year in Section 4. Section 5, really a time to reflect on what has the data telling us, what have we learned this school year. And then of course, moving forward with the continuous cycle of continuing our collaboration and moving forward towards future goals. So that's how we've organized the agenda and the presentation. So next slide, and you've all seen this a handful of times. Just a nice visual, kind of reviewing the steps that are taken in terms of identifying goals and measuring goals, and really focus on creating SMART goals. So you can see 5-step approach. Start with data and what are the problems you want to address. So there's a theory. If we do this, we'll get results matched with a measured goal that's measurable, achievable, and relevant, and it's down to a time with action steps. Specific action items that folks throughout the organization are committed to individually and collectively. And then the progress monitoring work that goes along with the day in, day out work of trying to meet a goal. So that's the cycle that we really focus on. As we've developed presentations throughout the school year at board meetings, and as we've worked toward building agendas at our leadership meetings, we've really kind of kept this model at the forefront in terms of how we're approaching and sharing the work that's happening throughout the school year. So next slide, again, this is nothing new. This, you've all seen what our umbrella goals are heading into the school year in terms of focusing on increasing proficiency in literacy and math, increasing graduation rates, and ultimately enhancing a sense of belonging for students. And each presentation throughout this school year, we've tried to highlight what the presentation was and kind of where it fit within the CIP. So I hope you've seen that trend throughout the year with our presentations. And tonight, I think tonight's presentation is really a good summary of all of the in-depth presentations that have been given from September till May. So it's ensured of stewardship and making sure we're moving forward. Just a couple of examples. Here's an example of how we've identified action steps. We've created accountability partners within our admin team that we regularly check in terms of progress. And different folks on the team have had targeted goals for the entire team to keep on the radar as we've approached this school year. So there's a basic example of like an individual of a leadership team taking a responsibility to keep certain topics on the forefront of our work. And then the next slide is really a school focused in terms of how each school fits within underneath the umbrella of our continuous improvement plan throughout this school year. And what we've tried to do, if you all know that some systems that we have in place for leadership work are, we have a regular full day administrative meeting each month of the school year, September through June. And those are 7-hour days where we meet in here and we work very diligently with about a 30-minute, 40-minute lunch break and a couple of 10-minute breaks in between. But as we build each agenda for each month, what we're keeping in mind is the overall goals of our action plan and how we're creating opportunities to really check in and hold each other accountable as leaders, and how we are holding our schools accountable in moving forward with the work. So our continuous improvement plan is not stale. This is something that guides us throughout the school year. And we use as checkpoints strategically throughout the year to ensure that as a system we're moving forward. And you know, if there's a school or administrator who's not pushing that agenda forward, it would become evidently clear based on how we work together and identify agendas with very clear follow through throughout the school year. So you can see this is an example of at this September meeting, we went through a process where by October 11th, each school principal and leader determines what they're going to achieve from that first week in September to October 11th. So that gets recorded, and then when we come to our October meeting, we come back to specifically what we said we were going to do, and we ensure that there was follow through. So that's an example of how we are staying on top of accountability and moving the system forward. Outside of the full admin meetings once a month, our elementary team principals meet with our central office team regularly within that month, 1 to 2 times per month for a formal meeting. And then we do the same thing on this campus with PU 6 and the Career Center. Essentially every other week we're meeting. So those are some basic systems that we have in place to collectively work together to ensure that we're moving, you know, the big ship of the school district forward. And we're really building in accountability pit stops along the way to ensure that that work's happening. And if it's not, there's areas for differentiation and checking in and moving certain systems along. But it's also a great opportunity to share exciting things that are happening in our schools. And you'll see, I think, section 4 where we're highlighting just some stories that are really worth sharing. Those will be told a little later this evening. So that's how we approach the school year, track the school year, consistently work together, push each other, and ensure that we have accountability. And a common thing we talk about is, as we're having these shared experiences, how is it going to be reflected at the school? What is the staff meeting going to look like for this month, next month, the following month? How are the staff meetings and the trainings tied to work we're doing as a system? Those have been very deliberate conversations and work that we've done pretty consistently. So that's kind of the intro and the overview of how we move our system forward from kind of the big 15,000 foot view. Our next section focused on our continuous improvement plan. We have a number of folks who are going to lead us through this section. So I believe maybe John Gagnon can start.
So hi, I'm John Gagnon. I'm the principal at Guilford Central School, and I'm going to come up here. First, Mark talked about the accountability and how we work together as a group. And I started out many years ago as the youngest principal in the admin team. I was the boy wonder, and now I'm the old man. So with double cataract surgery, I got to come up here. So somebody got to help me here. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Okay, I'm not kidding, guys. So by June 2025, accelerate the learning of all students. I'm going to emphasize that. All our kids. All of them. Kids that are on IEPs, kids that are not on IEP. Kids that qualify for free and reduced lunch, kids that don't qualify for free and reduced lunch. Boys, girls, all of the subsets. All of our kids. We want to accelerate that learning by 10% or more. Proficiency as measured by VTCAP and benchmark data. So, spring 2024, last year our VTCAP score was 54% proficient in ELA. We do not have our 2025 ELA VTCAP data now. We won't have it until the middle of the summer. We are not going to know until mid-July, best case scenario. Well, here's what we do know. So what you're looking at with this chart is you're looking at DIBELS, which we do K through 8th. And it's a measure that we're looking at the predominant measure of proficiency fall to spring. And these are all the kids in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, up through 8th grade. And as you can see on the far right, in the fall, 25% of the kids in our current kindergarten were measured proficient by the DIBELS measure. In the spring, we're at 61% of those kids measured proficient. That is a huge success. It's a huge win for our system and for our children. And then it goes through here, first grade, 36% proficient in the fall, 43% proficient in the spring. And then you can look at the rest of them. I think you all have that right in front of you. As you can see, K1, 2, you're seeing some good growth. In third grade, it slows down a bit. Fourth grade is a challenge for us. And that is something for us as a system to look at. In fourth grade, we began in the fall with 60% proficient. We ended up with 49% proficient. Then you go to fifth, a little bit of growth, sixth, a little more growth, seventh grade, another major transition. We have 56% proficient in the fall and 53 in the spring. Eighth grade, 53% proficient in the fall, 60% in the spring. And then for all K through 8, 47% were proficient in the fall, with 53% proficient in the spring. So as measured by our benchmarking data, we did not make the 10%, but we made some good growth. We measured at 6% growth. Coupled with, I want to point again to that kindergarten data. Going from 25% proficient to 61% proficient is huge. And what it does, it lays the foundation for systemic change for all of our kids. This is tremendous. And I'm the kind of person that's glass half full or the glass half empty. My natural bias is the glass is half empty. But I've trained myself over years to look at the glass as half full. And this to me is, we're more than half full. We are on the right path. Next slide, please. This is a way of looking at matched cohorts. So what that means is, if you look over on the right, it says our kindergartners in 24 to first grade in 25. So those are all the kids that were in our system last year as kindergartners, and now are in our first grade this year. K-24 to first grade 25, you see 17% growth in their proficiency. From first to second, 1%, 2 to 3, 3%. Again, third to fourth. This is an area for us again to look at as a system. Is you see it's a 7% decrease. It's telling us something. I think we're going to have to dig in there over the summertime and really look at this systemically, what's going on here. And then fourth to fifth, 1%. Fifth to sixth, 4% growth. And then district-wide, again, it measures with the matched cohorts. The matched cohorts, that's a 3% growth. Now, this is an interesting slide. Looks like, well, I'm not sure. Okay. So today I caught myself. Overall, WSESU students who started the year below target grew at a rate that resulted in 10 and a half months of growth. The national average for school year is 9 months of growth. So, if you look over again to the kindergarten cohort, the numbers you see in that column, those are not percentage numbers. Those are actual numbers of children. And these are our kids that we're measuring below the target, either at our fall benchmark or our winter benchmark. And then where did they end up with our spring benchmark? And so I'm going to move over here. So we had 12 kids in kindergarten that were below the benchmark in the fall or the winter. And at the end, there were 12 kids, 23%. And these kids grew between 0 to 10% growth during the year. We had 23 kids that grew between 10% to 30% growth during the year, moving up towards making it toward, what was their growth for the entire year? 30 kids in the kindergarten cohort that grew at 30%, between 30% and 60%, and that's around the average growth. That's around the 9-month growth. And then you start to see there were 28 kids how they grew through the year. They grew over that national average of the 9 months. They were into the 60 to 80th percentile range where they're starting to grow. Down here, they're starting to grow around, let's say, 9.5, edging on towards 10 months of growth for the entire year. And then finally, in the kindergarten column, there were 15 kids that their growth rate was, it was up in the 90th to 100th percentage rate. And those kids made, those kids are over 11 months of growth. Brenda, do I have that right?
You get an extra cookie, John.
Okay,
In fact, I think
I am
some of
very
those-
football day.
Some of those kids in the blue actually had like 24 plus months of growth. So kids who in one school year are making almost 3 years worth of progress when compared to national peers.
So when you look at all of our children that were below the target, and by the end of the year, you're looking at kids that have, some of these kids have grown, on average, they grew 10.5 months. And some of them go up to 24 months, as Brittany was saying. So this is another celebration, is that our average rate of growth is over the typical 9 months that you would think of during the school year. So when I look at this data, as Mark was saying, we're not where we want to be, but what the data is telling us is we're on the right path. We gotta keep what we're doing. So the analogy for me is that, I like to run. And I'm not the fastest runner, but I know that if I can get into a pace, I've got my rhythm down, that I just keep putting one foot in front of the other. I've got my breathing down, and I can get these chubby little legs going for miles. And this tells me that we're hitting our stride, and we've got to keep doing what we're doing. We've got to look at what's going on with 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, but we're on the right path. So Brent, I'm going to turn it over to you.
We've had the pleasure over the last couple of weeks of visiting many of our K-8 schools to have end-of-year benchmark data meetings where we sit with each team to talk about growth, what kids made a lot of growth, what kids didn't make a lot of growth, what programmatically supported that, what do next year's teachers need to put into place. And what I want to say aloud in this meeting right now is that we have certain measures that we're looking at here. So in this case, we're looking at a nationally normed benchmark assessment that's actually like a 1-minute read for many kids that we know closely predicts overall reading ability. And what I'm reminded about in these data meetings is this is by no means the only measure through which we look at student growth. And the conversations that we're having with teachers right now are so rich in terms of how children are improving, how the system is supporting them. And we're really, really focused on, there might be a student who, is really struggling to read. Maybe they're a 3rd grader reading 15 words a minute. They're at the 10th percentile, they're in the red, if you will. And we're having conversations about some of these kids, even with 24 months of growth, who might be finishing the year reading 50 words a minute. And that constitutes 24 plus months of growth. And they're not quite reading fast enough yet to move them kind of into that proficient range. But what we know is as kids are growing at a faster pace than normal, they're closing the gap in relation to their grade level peers. And of course, there are some students who did not make that growth. And so we're really looking at those cases as well, where the gap might be widening to have all of the safety nets through our MLSS system that we have in place to try to support them. So I just want to name that as we look at the data tonight, that this is some measures that we're looking at to see are we on pace. And by no means is it the be all end all. And I think it's really through the process of triangulating a lot of the data that we have that we can really look and tell the whole story of what's happening for our students. So I'm going to talk a little bit about literacy in our middle and high school system. And we started using a different assessment for middle and high school students called the STAR assessment. That's the same benchmark assessment we use for math, 2nd through 12th. But we started STAR last year, and there's still a few kinks to work out. I think one can jump in terms of making sure we get all of our students assessed. So for example, if they miss school, catching them up, that kind of thing, and really looking at some of our trends over time. It's a newer assessment to us, and it's a little bit more in depth. It does take kids somewhere between 20 to 50 minutes to engage with that assessment. So this is our trends over the last 2 years. The blue line is representing percentage of kids at BAMS who were proficient over the past 2 years. And so this is 2 falls ago, into the winter, into the spring, and then again this year, fall, winter, spring. So blue is BAMS and the orange is BHS. And you can see over the last couple of years, we're having a little uptick and then down. And so we're really having a lot of work focusing on what kind of systems that we can put into place at the middle and high school to really support and change this trend. And I know Ben's gonna talk a little bit more about that later. So I think that's an example of looking at our data, seeing the spring benchmark data come back, and really having conversations of like, okay, so what can we do about this? This is a different trend than what John was just presenting, and the team really coming together to think about supports to change that trajectory. And switch to math. So we do use, as I mentioned, STAR for our 2nd through 4th graders. It's a very similar goal that we had in our CIP for math as we did for literacy. Last spring we were 36% proficient across the district. So kids in 3rd through 9th grade take that math assessment in March and April of the school year. We found last year that STAR was a pretty good predictor overall of what our overall VTCAP percentage of proficiency was going to be. So again, this is the last 2 years, district-wide. We have fall, winter, spring, and then this fall took quite a dip, and then had a huge trajectory of growth throughout the winter and spring. So these were data when they came back we were really quite excited about. In fact, almost 64% of all of the students in our system, 2nd grade through 12th grade, are growing at a rate equal to or faster than the national average. And so we're seeing that in that increased slope of that line. So it tells us that we are on the right track, we hope, with our math grade. This is the same information disaggregated by grade level. So you can see there's kind of, I'm gonna move right here so I can actually see it. There's definitely a shape to those data, and we're looking at that closely and trying to give some extra supports to grade levels who might be having some more challenging results right now. Currently that's our 9th grade class. We know that's a big transition for kids. A lot is changing and they're entering a new system. And so that's really a place that we know that mathematical proficiency is really important for kids entering high school. We saw huge growth with our 6th graders this year. In fact, almost 78% of them grew at or above the average rate. So we're really trying to figure out what's happening there and capitalize on that and extend that to other grade levels as well. We also found with an analysis of the data that some of our 3rd graders maybe need some more support with intervention strategies. And so that became apparent through looking at our STAR data, and that's something that we're looking at as well. And this is kind of that same information, just disaggregated by grade level. So John showed a graph like this for literacy. We're looking from 2024 to 2025. What changed for different grade levels. And as I mentioned, we're seeing a lot of growth with some of our primary students. Those are kids for whom we implemented our new math IM curriculum. I think we started 3 years ago. It's been a gradual increase in our use of that program, and we were in full implementation last year. And we know that often results lag implementation a little bit to see that show up with our students. So this feels really heartening for our K through 8th crowd that we're starting to see results from that. And I know there's a lot of work happening with the NEASC work at the high school to really align some of our math curriculum there as well. And as John said, we don't have our spring VTCAP results yet, but we'll be happy to share those with you. I heard Keith was betting on the Red Sox game last night. I did not, but I would bet that our VTCAP results are going to be increased from last year based on his measurement. You can tell me where I can put that wager in. And I want to mention too, we have achievement gaps, and that's what John was referring to in terms of we are striving to support proficiency for all learners. And each of those bars there is representing kind of the gap between some of our historically marginalized subgroups. And so literacy is on the left and math is on the right. So in literacy last year for VTCAP, 54% of all students together were proficient. If we break that out between students not experiencing economic hardship and students experiencing economic hardship, we see a gap here, right, an opportunity gap. And there's this even bigger gap between our students who are not on IEPs and our students who are on IEPs. So in addition to looking at overall proficiency rates, we're really looking at where these gaps lie, so we can, with our full intention with our MLSS system, really try to address and shrink those gaps for all kids. Yeah, and so we'll be, again, once we get our VT cap, we'll be able to look and see if we made progress with that 10% growth rate as well, of trying to shrink those gaps. And then hand it over to Nancy, who's gonna talk about measuring growth at the Career Center.
So at the Career Center, we use a test called the Work Keys Assessment, and we give that test twice a year. And we use that to measure growth, and proficiency. The nice thing about the Work Keys is that, it's geared toward career and technical education. It's also used for adults, and, if students achieve a 5 or better on the test, it's scored at a -3 through a 7. If they achieve a 5 or above, they're considered proficient. And that data gets reported to the state of Vermont, but it also, they can earn some college credits for having a 5 or above. Depending on the college or the credentialing program. And they also can achieve benefits if they join the military and have a 5 or above. So that pays off for students who are moving into college or the military. It also often will buy them, in some areas it will buy them a little bit more money in their first job, coming out of a high school career center program. It equates between 50 cents and $1 an hour, so that's pretty significant. So when we look at our data for last year, which was reported by the state of Vermont, we saw some pretty incredible growth. Board does not reflect well when you stand at the wrong angle. So our 4-year graduation rate had actually dropped somewhat. We didn't quite make the state average, and that's a reflection of 6 students that did not graduate that we expected to graduate. And for some reason, each of them for a very particular reason, but various reasons, did not graduate based on their last quarter of high school. So that intervention time is very short. Some of those students will graduate this year, and some of them actually left high school. Only 2 of those students were Brattleboro students. So just a reminder, we accept students from 5 different supervisory unions. So luckily that's not a marker for Brattleboro as a whole. Proficiency in workplace documents, students were at 64.74%. The statewide rate was at 47, so we were significantly higher. Our proficiency in math was 62. Our target was 56, and the state rate was 53.71. And our proficiency in science, which we only test science in 11th grade, and so we don't ever retest while they're at their career center, so it's really hard to measure growth in science. So we were at 34, we were just above the state rate. This year, and this is Nancy Weiss data, checking, so please, we'll get the official state information, probably in the late fall, early winter. But our fall scores were 47.49 in reading. We went to 55, so our growth rate was just under 10% at 8.07%. In math, our proficiency was at 52 in the fall, we were at 66.29 in the spring, so we grew 14.29%, which we were pretty proud of. And then there's a third test in Work Keys called graphic literacy, which is really about reading graphs diagrams, knowing how to read a floor plan, knowing how to do all the math that goes along with reading those things. And the growth there was 8.89%. So overall, not our full 10% in 2 areas, but fairly close. So we're hopeful. And we'll continue our intervention program for next year.
Alright, hey everybody. So I'm gonna talk about graduation rates. I will share that I've reached out to the AOE a couple of times without getting a response, just to find out kind of where they're getting the data from and what we should be looking at in-house. Our hope next year is that we're gonna create a system that we can track it better in the building so that we have data that is more current than what we have right now. And I'm just gonna share a few things that we've put in place this year or that we are putting in place next year to try to help with the graduation rate. One thing I wanted to point out that Kevin shared earlier was that the historically 50% of dropouts have been students on IEPs, and that has decreased to 33%. So I think that's a huge win for students that are special ed and receiving services. We also have partnered with BT, and VAL, and VAL is Vermont Adult Learning. BT is Vermont Virtual Learning Collaborative. And so in both of those situations, partnering with them leads to more flexible pathways for students to earn UHS credits to be able to graduate on time. We have expanded our Tier 2 services. So 2 years ago, we created what's called the Hub, and it's for our students who are needing more Tier 2 supports, and mostly it's around academic need, but sometimes there's a little bit of behavioral in there too, just because obviously when you're not understanding something, sometimes behaviors come out. And so this year we did a pilot of one core math class being taught in that space, and it went really well for those students. And next year we're going to offer each of our core content areas will have one class in that space next school year to allow students to be able to maximize and get some core content credit. In addition to that, we're going to pilot another program that Lauren Albert is going to be the teacher for, and that's going to be, students are going to be able to take from VTVLC courses in that space so that they're getting academic support from a teacher as needed, but it's really focused on kind of moving at your own pace and doing learning in a more individualized environment. One thing that we're going to try this summer is reaching out by phone to all of our students who have unenrolled in the last couple of years, just as a check-in to see where they're at and welcome them back if they are interested in rejoining with some of our new things we have in place to help support our recent students who have unenrolled. And then the 2 other things is we discussed last week at an SST meeting the need for, right now at the end of your senior year, if you are not on track to graduate, we send you a letter saying you're not on track to graduate. So we thought, why aren't we doing this in 9th grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade, and 12th grade? So we decided that we're gonna send a letter to all families at the end of every year saying here's where your student is in terms of graduation. They're on track to graduate, or here's the missing components, but they can still do it on time, or here's the missing components and here's how we can help you get to graduation. And the last thing is attendance. So next year, Sam Stein is the new Dean of Students, and her huge focus next year is going to be around students' attendance, enrollment, partnership with local organizations. She's already she hasn't technically started yet, but she's been to a few meetings that have been a collaboration between the area supervisory unions and the state attorney's office to figure out how we engage our families to make sure that students are getting to school. Because if they're not here, they're definitely not getting credit, and that's one huge barrier we have right now. And so at the end of every school year, BUHS seniors, if you have any seniors in this room and you want to hint, make sure they fill out their survey. Nikki Braun, who is the office manager for the counseling department, sends this out to all seniors, and it is a requirement before they get their caps and gowns. And so if they don't do it before then, they'll be sitting down with a counselor at cap and gown checkout to fill it out. But basically, what are you doing after BUHS? And so this gives us a sense of like, of where students are going. And our aspirations team looks at this a lot to figure out like, who are we missing? And this is a big part of why not that college isn't important, but our college-bound students are going to college whether we help them or not, because they're driven, their families are driven. We're missing a large piece of this puzzle. And so we're using this data to focus on making sure every student at UHS is graduating with a plan for what their path looks like after graduation.
Is the undetermined also unanswered, or is that just,
Nope, that's just undetermined.
they just don't know?
Yep.
Kids have said, I don't know.
Yeah, this just represents, I think it's only 30 students that have filled
No,
it.
this is all the students, so I think the undetermined includes the students
It
who
is,
haven't
okay.
filled it out yet.
Okay.
That's a better answer, I like that one better. Yeah, but there's only like 40, I think, that have filled it out so
Oh, no,
far.
there's a lot that have filled it out.
Oh, maybe just send the email, I don't have it filled in. This is our impromptu, we haven't.
So can I just ask, going back to Ruby's point with the undetermined, is there a way of breaking it out so we know what percentage didn't fill it out, what percentage are truly uncertain about what they're doing next?
No.
I believe, I can find out, because I do wonder if undetermined is just you haven't filled it out, because there's so many, like, if your
There are
next step is in.
93 students who didn't fill it out, and there are 188 total responses.
So we're like
There are,
halfway there.
that's
So
that 49%.
I bet that's,
If
That's
the
if they haven't filled it out.
undetermined is 93 students, and there's 188 total responses. So that's about half the students,
so
that
that
49%.
49.2 is probably,
The people
hasn't
who
filled
haven't
it
filled
out.
it out yet. Who will have to fill it out before they get their caps and gowns.
Because I would say all those other options, there's something every single kid is doing.
So this could likely get updated in the end of the year.
Yep.
Everybody, Julianne Egan from Dummerston School and Mary Kaufman from Oak Grove. We're gonna talk a little bit about sense of belonging. So one of our goals for our CIP is sense of belonging, and sense of belonging is a critical area to measure for us because we know that a student's sense of belonging, their sense of community at their school, their attachment to school forms like the foundation of the feelings they have when they walk in the building and their sense of like, I belong here, I want to participate in my learning. And it's just a crucial area, and the panorama data allows us to like look at this over time. Mary and I both use the program Developmental Designs at our school, which is a tier 1 program for social emotional learning and academic, like a framework for all the learning that happens in our school. And that program really, it really points out that when we have students who every day come to school and feel a sense of challenge, they have relationships, they're having fun, they have autonomy and safety, when those ingredients are in play each day and we are intentionally planning for that, we will see students feeling a greater sense of community, and we'll see learning take off in all these different areas of the school day. So when we look at our sense of belonging from spring 23 to spring 25, the blue line represents 3rd to 5th grade, Panorama separates that out. We are kind of in a stable holding pattern in that area. And in the orange, which is the 6th through 12th, we're seeing our data increase, so that is good news. Typically, we've seen lower scores for 6th to 12th. Some of that is what we'd expect developmentally. You'd expect 7th graders where they are, and kind of their sense of themselves at that time to trend slightly lower. And you see that nationally as well. And so that is reflected here. Go to the next slide.
Next slide. These just show the rates of completion at each school. All the schools in our district take this survey, starting in grade 3 up through grade 12.
Good. Can you go back to 2 slides? No,
Sorry.
there. It says that we're in the 80th percentile for high school students nationwide at 49%. How can that be correct at 49% when I think the national average is 53%?
So the Panorama survey platform allows us to look at our data and our percentages and to compare them to similar kinds of groups. Because there are lots and lots of schools across the country that use this, so they create a huge bank of data and then find where those bell curves are and what the norms are, kind of what the cut scores are. So when we compare our schools to other non-urban schools with 30 to 70% of poverty, that 49% of kids who are responding favorably is actually at the 80th percentile nationally. It's a little bit inverse, and I was frankly surprised to see that, where our higher results 3 to 5, where 64% of kids were responding favorably, were at the 30th percentile when compared to similar non-urban 30 to 70% poverty schools. So the story that tells me is generally younger kids are a lot more positive about school on this survey, and older kids generally across the whole nation are less positive. However, our kids, especially our high school kids, were very positively responding on this survey when compared to huge data sets of people who answered.
But again, that subset is non-urban and poverty?
Yes. Yeah. Non-urban, middle school separate, high school separate, 30 to 70% poverty.
Yeah. So the question is, how do we go from the 30th percentile to the 80th percentile?
For our 3 through 5 band.
How do we do that?
We're working on it every day.
Because this gets to theory of action, knowing what interventions caused a change.
Yeah, and we'll look at some data trends across in the next few slides, but I did want to note, this year we did the survey twice. The past several years we've taken one in the winter. As you can see, it didn't make a huge difference in giving that survey twice. In fact, in grades 6 through 12, we saw some growth across the board. From winter 24 to then fall 24 and then spring 25. But we've maintained where we were, dropped a few percentage points in our 3rd through 5th grade survey. These are just the sense of belonging questions, and you'll note in 2 of the questions you'll see parentheses. That means the wording of the question changed over time. So it's asking the same thing but in a different way. Ideally more kid-friendly, sometimes they get a little wordy in there, but the questions not in parentheses are what were on this year's 2025 survey. You can make a whole bunch of hypotheses around what happened and why do we get these data points the way we do. It appears that perhaps in the 6 through 12, maybe the time of year helps. We're getting, excited for the next step, and we're in a good place, or we've had a lot of intervention. Whereas 3 through 5, the end of an elementary school year can be hard, right? It's you're moving on to the next class, or you're thinking about that. Things are wrapping up, so there's lots of ways to interpret the data, but what we know are the numbers that are in front of us. I think we had slightly less response rate in the spring as well. That also plays a part. This is the disaggregated trends. They are hard to identify with the number of students that we have. You will notice, interestingly enough, the youngest grade band in each of the surveys is where the most positive results are, which is interesting. So like our 3rd graders have the highest number of favorable results, and then again, our 6th graders in the 6 through 12 survey. And you can read the descriptions up there, but breaking this down by race, grade, age, not a ton of
differences, not something we could like pull out and pinpoint, like, this is it. But it is good data.
And to your, to your question, Tim, if you look at each school's individual CIP and you look at our CIP for our district in terms of the action steps under this goal, there are some interventions happening. There are interventions happening at each school around this question. So when we think about MLSS, multi-layered systems of support, we can still kind of think about that as just math and literacy, but the social emotional piece and our community as a whole, there are programs that are tier 1 as well as for every school and every grade, a whole set of interventions that are happening each day that are planned and that are put in place in order to create this feeling and this sense of belonging. This is also an area that our student middle school leadership teams work on. They work on sense of belonging, and they use this data to craft their own action plans in collaboration with us as staff. So those are also some really exciting initiatives that are going on at each of our schools, is getting student voice and student leadership in understanding this data and how they can work as leaders of their school to really bring their community together. So we've talked a lot about that throughout the year.
The prior graph is interesting. It's I'm trying to figure out the negative numbers, and students of color tend to be lower in terms of, what are we looking at? We're looking at trends, right?
So what the colors on this are trying to highlight where the distance is from all. Kind of like those disaggregated bar charts that we were looking at before. And so because it's two separate surveys, the 3 to 5 is on the left and the 6 to 12 survey instrument is on the right. And so where we see boxes that are colored green, those are students who are generally answering more favorably than average, and red boxes less favorably than average. What was interesting when we were looking at this in the 3 to 5 survey, some of our racial categories were a little bit answering less strongly, more negatively, and it was almost the flip for the 6 to 12 survey in some of those same categories. So it's very interesting to see that. And in fact, our strongest distance from average was the responses of our multilingual learners. Those are in the upper right-hand corner, those very strong +23, +21 responses. So visually, this is just trying to give a sense of like how far from the middle did some of these disaggregated groups answer. And Panorama gives us these data, and it tries to look at different categories through which we can view the data and see if there are trends over time. Does that answer your question, Tim?
Yeah, I wonder how this connects to students who are disaffected as they are graduating. And how this reflects on that chart of students who are, not that college is the be all and end all, but somehow or the other, I think we're all sitting here with college degrees, at least, I think, for the most part. So it's important. But that undetermined number, however it breaks out, half who are really unsure about what they're doing post-high school. So I wonder how that correlates with this in terms of students who are disaffected. Anyway, it all hinges together in some way.
All right, I'm going to talk about professional development. We did a session about PD back in May for the SU board, so we're going to be brief here. But we offer professional development throughout the year to all of our teachers and staff, aligned with our CIP goals based on student data. And we try to differentiate this PD to meet the needs of our stakeholders, our teachers. So if we think about this through the lens of MLSS, we have multiple layers of supports that we provide to our teachers. So layer 1, that's what we provide to everyone. We have district-wide PD days, and other differentiated offerings for all teachers. Then at layer 2, we have targeted opportunities for some teachers, and at layer 3, we have specialized PD for a few folks who need it. And we'll also look ahead to next year. So, you can go to the next one here. We have the different layers of PD that we're offering. These are just some of the offerings at each of the different levels. So, district PD days, EL implementation, equity, social justice, grade level meetings, vertical team meetings, special ed trainings, and the monthly admin meetings for our administrators. At layer 2, we offer a lot of these things where teachers can opt into them or teachers are invited to participate in. And then at layer 3, we target specific offerings to the needs of a few teachers who have those specialized needs. Next year, we are hoping to follow that same structure of providing PD at different layers. We're hoping to do our district days with strands that continue throughout the year, so teachers will meet together in October as a group on a particular theme, and then they'll have some time to take that learning back to their classroom, apply it, and then come back together again in February and reflect on that knowledge and continue to learn more on the same topic. We're planning to do grade level meetings with teachers K through 8 based on, and academic support teachers based on needs surrounding curriculum implementation, rollout of the portrait of a graduate, and diversity and equity work. We're going to do that 3 times throughout the year in October, late January to February, and March. And then another thing we're hoping to do for all staff next year is a monthly faculty meeting dedicated to diversity and equity that's facilitated with the administrators and the teacher leaders within each building. So that's just a quick overview of professional development.
Question. When you're speaking about professional development, where do paraprofessionals fit into that PD?
Yeah, so this year we had paraprofessionals join us for the district-wide days, and so we designed sessions for them, and they can choose from the same options that teachers can choose from. In addition, on the parent-teacher conference days, when teachers are in conferences in the afternoon, we have additional PD sessions targeted at the paraprofessionals. Next year, we're gonna, because the paraprofessionals don't have the same work days as the teachers, we're going to have the paras be on site for the school-based days rather than the district-based days, so they can be involved in the work with the buildings and the staff in their building. And then in addition to that, we'll still do the work on the conference days when teachers are in conferences.
Do we get any feedback from staff on the effectiveness or their thoughts on PD days?
Yes, and we have all of that in the SU presentation that we gave on May 9th, I think. May 16th. So you are welcome to go to that presentation linked in the minutes and you'll see a lot more detail on that.
We typically run surveys for everything that we do, whether it's a meeting or just people love surveys. But it is really helpful to have that information back. And in fact, this spring, we're doing a lot of polling staff to see what are the strands that are really important to you next year, what are the things that are rising to the top, and then we can start to also disaggregate that by school site or by grade level so we can try to be really planful. I think it's important to note we have a very diverse work staff here in the district, and so we try as best we can to meet all educators' needs in terms of the range of offerings. So there's something there for counselors, and there's something there for our paras, and there's something there for the band teacher. And I think some years we do that better than others, and so we're also really asking teachers like, hey, what do you all need? And what's most helpful and supportive to your work right now. That being said, we're trying to move toward seeing our staff as everyone as a teacher of literacy and math and a supporter of social emotional learning. And so as much as we want to offer something for everyone's unique position, we are also trying to kind of break down those walls to offer some global opportunities to think about the whole trajectory of a child's education.
Could you briefly articulate how that layer 3 support for PD, how is that targeted? How are you identifying those teachers? And who's in that room?
So people who are new to teaching are assigned one-to-one mentors. So they have a mentor who works closely with them all year, and they do co-observations together. They observe each other.
And they get that layer of mentor support, and then we also have mentor support for teachers who are in years 2 or 3 of teaching. We also have mentors for teachers who are new to the district but experienced teachers. We offer new hire orientation just to those folks who are new. We offer coaching through our instructional coaches and our district-based coaches. Teachers can request that, or it can be recommended by an administrator within their building. And then we offer the PD funds. Teachers get to choose how to use those PD funds. So that's based on their specific needs. And then the 1% is something that teachers have to apply to, but that's another chance.
That same supervisory union meeting in May, early May, has an interesting matrix with that really quite detailed outline.
So now we'll pass it over to Brian, who's gonna talk about our
All right.
big kindergarten success.
Kindergarten literacy, what could be more important? I'm Brian Finner, I'm the reading coach for the supervisory union, and I'm going to talk to you about some kindergarten literacy data. One thing I love about working in this district is that there's room and flexibility to make reasonable programmatic changes over time as new tools become available to us. And over the last 2 years, we've made some changes to our early literacy program. We previously used a program called Foundations, and over the last 2 years, moved to a program called UFly. UFly just is an acronym, stands for University of Florida Literacy Institute. And in kindergarten, we paired that with a program called Soundtown, which helps kids learn about the different speech sounds in English and then how to pair them with letters. And so obviously when we're introducing new programming, it's important to collect data to monitor the performance of that. And so what you have in front of you are the results of our end of the year kindergarten data. And we're using DIBBLS. You've heard that term before. You might not know what it means. DIBBLS is an acronym, stands for Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills. They are timed assessments that look at some of the most important measures of early literacy. In kindergarten, the ability to hear a word like cat and then be able to tell you that the sounds in cat are cat, critically important. DIBBLS NWF. Kids read nonsense words, so they might say a word like TIV or NUF. We don't have them read real words because we don't want to rely on words that they've already seen, so they're decoding or reading novel words. And then in kindergarten, we also ask students to spell some words. And so what you're seeing here is end of the year data, so from the end of the 2023-24 school year to the data we just collected. So you can see for the phoneme segmentation fluency measure, kids, it's all auditory. They hear a word, they have to tell you all the sounds in that word. We saw 28% growth, which means 44 more kindergarten students are proficient with that measure. So that's like 3 classrooms with kindergarten kids more proficient. Incredible. So then we do the NWF test. So they're actually seeing nonsense words on a page and they are going, if the word is tiv, they might go tiv, or they might just read it as tiv. So you can see we moved from 41% of our students were proficient in the last school year to 61% proficient, increase of 20%. So what does that mean? What's cool with our data management system forefront is we can run correlations. So if we look at what does it mean to be proficient with NWF in terms of being a reader at the end of first grade, so we can make some prediction. That means likely we're going to have 26 more students are going to be proficient readers at the end of first grade with this cohort than our previous cohort from 2023-24. So we're approaching like 2 first grade classrooms full of more proficient readers than we previously had before. Very exciting. So that's the ability, correct letter sound, that's the ability to look at a word and tell you the letter sounds. This measure over here is the ability to see that word and actually read it. So TIV is a good example. That's the one that's coming to mind at the moment. So 36 more students met that. And then really important is the ability to spell. Spelling often a misunderstood construct in early literacy, but it's a very strongly predictive measure of overall literacy ability and correlates very strongly to later reading. And over 80% of our kindergarten students, so that's 126 out of 156 students, are proficient the spelling what we call CBC words. So we have them spell real words. So we're like cats, or we're like rib, for example. So have a consonant and vowel consonant. So you can see we had 18% growth in that, and I think that's what that's telling us is a reflection on some of the changes we made to our early literacy programming that we're seeing great success. One thing I want to add is this was not isolated to one school. Every classroom in every elementary school had gains in their kindergarten data from 2023-24 to the data we just collected weeks ago. And so what that's showing, what that tells me is it's not a cohort effect, it's not one school or another, it is sort of global programming success that we were able to experience with all of our kids. And what that really allows us to do, so this group is going to be moving into first grade next year and really reduces the need for some of our like tier 2 and tier 3 interventions and frees up those teachers to work with smaller, more refined groups. And we know that smaller, more refined groups in our early literacy program leads to better results. And preventing reading difficulty is a lot easier than remediating reading difficulty, so it's really exciting to see the results of our really championed kindergarten team took this on. There's a trust to switch out programming, and I think the results are, I'm very excited about them. And I think it's been fun to be at our recent data meetings. We were just at Green Street this morning, and the kindergarten team there is really ecstatic about the results that they've been able to realize with their students. So yeah, it's really exciting stuff.
Great. Hi, Whitney Line, Elementary Special Education Coordinator. I'm just going to share a little snippet of professional development within the special education world. I was thinking back, it was like last year right around this time that Brian Bittner, Becky Coloso, and I sat down and said, okay, what do we need for PD for special educators next year? And we developed a literacy PD series that we rolled out over the course of this year, which included 2 full days of training and 2 half days that took place right in here. And it was all of the elementary special educators coming together, which is a really unique opportunity just because they're spread across 7 schools. So having that time to come together, collaborate. One of the things that I found really helpful and effective was that we gave them a survey at the end of each of the days and said, okay, what worked? And like, what do you need? What are the top couple of things that you want us to focus on next time based on what we discussed today? And in that way, we were really able to specialize and differentiate the PD specifically to the needs of the group. We also had people participate in peer observation across schools, so matched people up. So if we had a kindergarten through 3rd grade special educator at one school, we would match them up with another special educator at another school teaching similar grade levels, which is also a thing that is sometimes tricky to do as a special educator when there's not so many of you in one building. And that people really enjoy the opportunity to see their peers practicing some of the things that we had gone over and worked on together to really see what those looked like in each other's classrooms. We also did some DIBELS calibration, so like Brian just mentioned, that's just like a good kind of like your annual doctor's appointment. Like it's just one of those good things that's good to do every year to make sure that all this data that we're collecting, that it actually is accurate and valid and that we can use it to make programmatic planning decisions. And we dug deep into some phases of reading development and analysis of spelling inventories, like Brian just mentioned, those kindergartners that were just rocking that spelling inventory. Probably one of the best ways as a literacy teacher to know is this working or not is just to look at a kid's spelling and be able to really analyze what that tells you. And so we did a lot of that work together this year. And at the bottom half of this slide, I just put up, as we've been going to data meetings and talking with teachers, this is just an example of one special educator's her group of students. And this is just reading, obviously, so the special educator also works with students in math and writing, but this is just reading, the students that she works with. And I just wanted to show a visual because when you look at this on the left-hand side at first, you might think like, oh gosh, that's not great. Like there's a lot of red up there. And it looks potentially a little concerning. But But if you go over and you look at the right-hand column there, the months of growth, this is just an illustration of, you know, we have kids moving from the red to the red, but might have made 3 years worth of growth or more. And so I think, you know, when we say like, yes, we're on the right track, we're moving in the right direction, like this gives me a lot of hope to believe that that's true. It's not, you know, just we think that might be true. It's like when you look at this special educator and the group of kids that she taught, you know, many of them were really not readers or just barely becoming readers at the beginning of the year, and now you can solidly say they are reading. And so that's, you know, next year I get excited thinking about looking at this same cohort of kids next year, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, if they could make that much growth a couple years in a row, like we're really moving the needle there. So I just put that up there as an example of what that looks like in kids that do still have a long way to go but are making huge strides as far as catching up. And this special educator participated in this PD strand for literacy that we planned, and also was a special educator that had moved into special education from another role, was an experienced teacher, but new to special education, and so participated in coaching with Becky Peloso, who is an amazing special educator, liaison, evaluation liaison, and does a good bit of coaching as well. And so through all of those supports, you know, she felt very supported and feels, I was talking to her today, and she just feels exceptionally proud about her kids' progress and how they do. So some of what's happening in special education and professional development.
Okay, great. I'm John Sessions, principal of Hardy Central School. It's an honor to spend a couple of minutes talking about our primary team at PCS, which is truly an exemplary team of educators. In my 20 years working in schools, I've never really seen a team quite as inspirational as this team. So I'm happy to present their work and to show what outcomes can look like. And I think about John Gagnon's analogy of running, and it's sort of like the day after day after day. Over time, you see pretty significant change in growth, which is a lot of what we're talking about here, but it's nice to sort of ground it in a school and a team. And so here you see data, longitudinal data dating back to 2022 and 23 up to this current year, which is data that we just took 2 weeks ago. And to me, this highlights a lot of sort of the cross-section of some of the goals that we talk about in our continuous improvement plan, which is both literacy development and growth, and also a sense of belonging. And this, to me, really highlights how interconnected those two things are, which is why they're really a priority for our district. So you can see, just to quickly highlight this data, you know, you could do a case study on this team, and maybe I will someday. But just to summarize it, you can see that in the course of 2 years on the blue line, the percentage of our students in grades K through 3 who are proficiency on end-of-year literacy benchmarks has increased from 33% to 67%, which is double, essentially, in the span of 2 years, which is a pretty remarkable statistic. Simultaneously, the gold line shows the percentage of students who are identified as in academic high risk, and how that's reduced from 35% to 16%. Which that's changing those kids' lives. I mean, that is a life changer for a number of kids who are going through the primary grade. And then, not accidentally, the students' sense of belonging that they report on the student climate survey, once they get to 3rd grade through 5th grade, has increased from 53% 2 years ago to 73% now. Which is huge testament to the team, and I listed some contributing factors there, but it's the work of our teachers who come every day. It's our collaboration with our curriculum and assessment office and our district coaches who have spent countless hours with this team, and it's a great example of sort of a district unified effort to sort of push the work of a team to really change the course of a school and kids' lives. So, I just want to share that.
Can you explain more, because we need to understand why you're achieving, so you're doing so much better. It's not just, to applaud, you're doing great, but the district needs to know what intervention caused this. So more, besides building a team, can you say specifically what interventions really caused the growth?
Yeah, I mean, how much time do we, there's a lot, there's an immense, this is a dissertation and waiting to be written, I think, but.
It's important for us to know so other
Yeah.
students can
Yeah,
learn from it.
I'll say, Tim, sort of the high leverage points that I've seen really impact change has been the level of involvement of our district coaches. Brian essentially lived at Putney Central School for a long period of time, working with our primary teachers to develop their skill and comfort level with new curriculum. The same is true of Meg as our math coach, even though we're looking at literacy data now, there's a similar trajectory for math. I think there's that. I think there's just high quality tier 1 instruction in all of our classrooms, really effective intervention when that's needed, data-driven conversations. And I think you see examples of this throughout the district. I don't want to say that this is the only team that shows that example. I think what we're saying is we're seeing that everywhere. And you're right. Our conversation needs to be on what is leading to that success, right?
So, for example, can you correlate the increased number of hours in coaching to increased scores?
Yeah, anecdotally, yes. Yeah, I couldn't off the cuff say this number of hours led to this result, but for sure, yeah.
So piggybacking off what Tim is asking.
Sure.
How does your poverty rate in Putney compare with poverty rates in other school environments or IEPs correlate?
Yeah, our IEP rate is very similar. We have essentially identical to rates across the rest of the district. We're a little over 20% of our students on IEPs, and that's true for students in this data set. And poverty rate is lower than some towns in our district, but not significantly lower.
Can I briefly just chime in to something that Tim said, because my kids go to Putney Central, so I have a front, row seat to this. And the community school piece and the whole child approach, I think, have really significantly affected and have had a positive impact on the culture for students, for parents, for teachers. And that's something that I think, particularly over the last few years, when some of these, grants and accolades and things have come in, I think that's kind of work, it's representing work that has happened over many years. But I think that that's a significant piece.
That's a great point, and I think our board needs to hear much more about what's happening with the community schools project. I've asked several times, but it hasn't been included in the agenda. We really need to know what's happening with that, because it's a major innovation, which is very exciting, I think.
Okay, hi everyone, Cooper Gaius, Split Green Street. And as you know, through meetings throughout the year, we've had a heavy focus, for good reason, on literacy scores. But we can't forget about math, which is also important. And we adopted, I think all schools did, the goal around 10% growth in the CIP. So I was pleasantly surprised that we met that goal, because everything is feeling like literacy, but we've also been working hard in math. It just hasn't felt like that in a lot of our conversations. So this graph is showing fall 2023 to spring of 25, so 2-year proficiency trends. So number of students proficient. In the fall of 2003, we had 36% of students proficient in math, which is not great. And so over time, we had a little bit of a dip in winter,
came out a little bit higher, but really this year have grown quite a bit. You'll see that 49.7% proficiency rate. And this up here is really talking about the student growth percentile. So we had 125, this says 125 of 152 students scored at or above typical growth. And this is based on the STAR math, which is 2nd grade through 6th. So K and 1 don't take the STAR assessment. And which is up 13% from the fall of 23-24. So they're growing at a higher rate, leading to increased proficiency, similar to when we talked about reading growth percentile and wanting to be like 9 or more months growth. Our 82.2% of our kids are growing at a typical or above typical growth in math. So kind of like John was talking about contributing factors to that, we do have a lot of classrooms that have co-teaching model in our classrooms that really are focused towards cohorts that might need that extra support. It allows for that differentiation of instruction within that model, in addition to interventions that support that core instruction and are really aligned with that. And Meg helped us out a lot this year as a district in terms of supporting documents that really you can just look at and say, okay, how with this kid, their profile, how can we support them in getting and meeting, you know, the goals of accessing core instruction and what the topic is at that time. Pacing, we've seen a real connection with getting through all of the IM units and having exposure to grade level content is what we want for all of our kids to allow them to have that success. And yeah, I mean, our teachers have content planning time and really just looking at STAR data every month around like what student needs are and who's, you know, not where they're supposed to be and what can we do to get them there. So that's been really great. And our trend, a theme in our data meetings today was really centered around when they talked about pacing, but also setting high expectations for all of our kids. And setting that bar high and supporting them to get there is really important, instead of, well, you know, they're on an IEP, so they're not gonna grow as fast, or they're not gonna get there. There's none of that, because all of our kids, like we were talking about earlier, all of our kids have the opportunity to grow, and they have, like Bryn said in the meeting today, they have the right to have those high expectations set for them. So that's not the pitch.
Kate, can I chime in really quick? Kate is working on, the Green Street team is working on draft goals for next year's CIP, and originally it was like, you know, increase from 34% to 44% of kids proficient, and then we're like, you already did it, actually. So I imagine you'll just keep going, just keep going. Set it higher, yeah.
Alright, we're in the 5th section, 5 out of 6 of the presentation here. So we start with a literacy focus at UHS. Start over with them.
Good evening, everyone. Ben Coppola, Assistant Principal at Brattleboro Union High School. Excited to share, take the next couple minutes to share some new and exciting things that are happening in order to support literacy at both BUHS and BAMS. Over the last couple of months, teams of educators from both BUHS and BAMS have been meeting with our partners in curriculum and assessment and district leadership to talk about an area that I feel like has been a big theme of tonight. I know it's been a big area of focus in terms of the district's work over the last couple of years, which is how do we go about supporting literacy? Because there's one thing that we can do to really help our students unlock the benefits of their education across all content areas. It's to support reading and support reading well. And one of the things that came about in our discussions is the fact that, you know, as Brian, I think, pointed out, and many other people have spoken to throughout the night, we have it pretty dialed in elementary school in terms of keeping a really close eye on where students are in their reading skills in K through 6. However, when they start getting into the 7 through 12 grades at BAMS, at BUHS, there seems to be a cliff there. For the last 2 years, we've been using the STAR reading assessment, and while that is a really great assessment for gauging students' broad skills in the areas of English language arts, one of the things it doesn't tell us is if a student is really struggling with the active reading. And more importantly, if they are struggling with the active reading, like what specifically about reading is difficult for them. And so in our meetings, we've been trying to discuss what types of assessment systems we can set up and put in place in order to start drilling down into the literacy needs of our students to see if we can start moving the needle that you see in some of the gaps that exist with our subgroups of student populations. Like a lot of our proficiency data, there is a huge discrepancy between students who are economically disadvantaged and those who are not. Students who are on IEPs and students who are not. And then especially so for the double whammy, students who fall into both of those categories. The difference is stark and disturbing and something needs to change. And so one of the focuses here is to figure out, all right, for those students who aren't performing at grade level on their STAR reading exam, what other assessments can we be giving them to see, all right, is this a struggle that can be addressed or a challenge that can be addressed in their general ed classes, or is this something, once we drill down into their area of need, that is something that will call for an intervention in terms of literacy. And so the first thing that we're doing is trying to set up a system of assessment that's going to help us understand what are the areas of need. So if a student doesn't hit a certain cut score on their reading test for STAR, then they would take DIBELS. If we find out that it's something more than just a fluency problem, what's the next assessment we're going to give them? All in the name of trying to figure out, all right, what intervention can we provide to this student in order to start filling in the gaps in their reading skills. And so in addition to figuring out assessment system, trying to figure out how we can leverage our ASTs, our academic support teachers, within the framework of MLSS in order to start filling in those gaps, but then also trying to figure out what basic literacy skills can be used across all content areas in order to support everyone's literacy skills. And so what are just good practices for reading that can be spread across all of our content areas in order at a universal layer be able to move everyone up in terms of how well they read. And so I'm excited about it. And I think the team of people that we have around this issue right now are excited about it. It's now just figuring out the logistics on how we're going to support it and roll it out come next school year.
Yeah, I'll say this is a new focused approach that I've seen at the high school that frankly hasn't really been there. But Ben is right. There's a lot to learn around the systems and the usage of data and how we use it to identify interventions that are true and tested along the elementary grades. And this is really the first time that the school has developed a committee to really take a close look at this and think about efficient use of systems at a high school level. It's super exciting. Really want to highlight Bryn Tucker's leadership on getting this established, getting this team established, and really leading the charge with consistent messages, and also leaving each meeting with a have to. These are some things that we have to do to set us up at the next meeting. So we're still at very beginning stages, but it's really exciting that we're entering this level of analysis and systems development that we haven't had. So it's very exciting.
Hi, Stacey Sawyer. Keith and I are going to talk a little bit about learning walks and curriculum pacing. There's been lots of research across the country about what instructional practices move the needle, make a difference in the lives of students in the classrooms. And so our literacy curriculum that we adopted a couple of years ago has 8 embedded of those practices. So we started doing some learning walks a couple of years ago once we started getting our feet under us with the program to see where are those instructional practices happening in classrooms. We've been going into classrooms fall, winter, and spring to sort of collect some baseline data around what we're seeing in terms of those practices happening. That red line at the 80% mark is part of our CIP. One of the action steps is we were hoping to see the combined evident and somewhat evident, the blue and the green, reach 80% of classrooms. We would see those instructional practices. We're only in classrooms for 15 minutes, so it's really unlikely to see all of them in that 15-minute time frame, but over the course of seeing all classrooms, we're hoping to see those trends increase. So that's kind of gives us a baseline information about those, where we're seeing some success and where we have some room for improvement. So Keith, you want to talk about the next piece of that?
I would just add to that, those 8 practices, most of them are not new to educators, but EL has kind of put them in, packaged them as part of EL, and the new thing that we're trying to do is, particularly at the secondary level where in the elementary levels most teachers have to teach EL, at the secondary level only the English teachers teach EL. So we're trying to get all teachers to use these high leverage instructional practices across the curriculum. So this is reflected, we started to branch out we started with our learning walks just observing literacy, and now we're trying to expand it into science, into art, whatever subject area, which is nice. And most schools have done a lot of PD this year on these 8 instructional high leverage practices. So if you go to the next slide, we just looked at this term grappling, which we've all unpacked as administrators with our staff, and really it's around the kind of the rigor, not just having kids kind of working on little simple worksheets or whatever in class, but they're actually working on something that's challenging them, and they're having deep discussions, and they're thinking. So when we go into these classrooms, we're looking for evidence that, for example, grappling is happening, and we've seen a nice increase recently in the winter and spring of this year, and seen more of that. And when you ask the question, what's happening in John and Kate's classrooms we were talking about, I would guess that some of this stuff you're seeing a high level of student discourse. You're seeing
kids willing to persevere,
kids grappling. The next slide, student discourse is something. So, I don't really typically want to go into a classroom and see the teacher standing up front and talking for the 15 minutes I might be in there. You still see that in classrooms from time to time, not as much, but we're not seeing as much. This is the area we want to continue to improve upon, because there's a lot of research that says the more kids are talking to each other about their learning, that's kind of lead to a John Hattie's research says the more kids are talking about their learning with each other and learning from each other, the higher statistically they're going to have learning gains. So just sitting and listening to the teacher talk at them is not going to lead to the same gains. So this is the area we want to improve upon. It takes intentional planning to have kids turn and talk about something either with a partner or in a small group, and you have to teach them how to do it. And what does it look like, sound like, feel like? So that's it for learning.
So using that data to help us drive professional development needs across our schools, and that might come up in grade level meetings, but how can we use this data to help us figure out what are some next steps for improvement? In terms of pacing around both our literacy and math curriculum, we've seen, these are relatively new. They take a lot of effort from teachers to learn a new curriculum and put it into action and carry it out with enthusiasm. So we've seen some tremendous growth in terms of
getting through the material. And it's not just about getting through the material, but how do we support students in their learning as we get through the material. So just looking at 94% of teachers are finishing most of EL, which is a really hefty program. The lessons are packed with lots of important learning, and so how do we help support teachers in carrying that out on a day-to-day basis over the course of the school year? And we've also seen notable increase in teachers pacing through IM, which obviously also leads to what Kate was saying earlier about that increase in math proficiency. The more we are making sure students are exposed to grade level standards is an important piece of that process. So I've listed some next steps there and thinking about how we can continue to support teachers through professional development to help them improve, and because we're always improving every day, every year, and so how do we just keep even putting one foot in front of us, as John was saying earlier with the running analogy, we're just gonna keep up at that steady pace so that we can continue to improve, not just our own instructional practice, but also for the benefit of our students.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary Ross, I'm the principal at Vernon. I'm gonna do something unorthodox, don't worry, Mark. Could I ask everybody to just stand up briefly? No suspension. And really, this is the extent of the unorthodox. I'm just gonna ask you to stand for my slide, because I think we all need it. So, being a principal is isolating. Just as many of us in our roles, whether at home or in our professional roles. And so, you know, as one of a lucky group of 7 people who does the same job in these districts, I am always on a text or phone call or a quick Zoom meeting or a panicked, conversation with one of the other elementary principals and also many other colleagues on our administrative team. So the idea of, seeking professional guidance, support, ideas from a colleague is not new, but this year we have spent more time under Mark's guidance doing targeted principal peer observations. So this year I had the opportunity to observe John and Julianne as well, and I had the opportunity, as you can see in our little tiny photo, that's Ms. Margaitis next to our Vernon sign. So Kate came to see what we do at Vernon during our benchmark triennial data meetings. And it was an opportunity then and later to reflect and discuss what we do at each building, and just to kind of put it succinctly, how to steal great ideas, because that's kind of what I'm in the business of. So it was great for the opportunity to do that, and also just as always for the opportunity to collaborate with members of the curriculum and assessment team as well. Thank you, have a seat.
That's good, Mary.
Oh, it's me? Yeah. I'm trying to be absent. I'm tired. So this slide, not as exciting. We have an attendance issue, chronic absenteeism at Green Street. A high percentage of our students over the last few years, 23% I think it was, that were absent 15 times or more, is not good. And so we have set it as a CIP goal specifically to target certain steps to help support that and bring in more of a team aspect in supporting our families that need it most to get their kiddos to school. And unlike, math or literacy, it can be very diversified, case by case, for reasons that people are not attending school, and so you have to approach it with that in mind, that it's not going to be a one size sort of fits all by any means. So some of our action steps to decrease our absenteeism is using our current EST system to incorporate attendance in that. That's already built in. We haven't done that yet, so I think that step will be important to getting families and other supports at the table to talk about the importance of attendance, bringing back an attendance team of myself, the nurse, school counselor, social workers, to meet monthly, review attendance data, and reach out to families. Our school nurse this year has done a really good job. I think, since COVID, yes, we still talk about it. I think people were more like, oh, my kid has a cough, right? And hesitant to just send them when that happened. They were so used to kind of just staying home, nope, they're not feeling well. When, the school nurse has really been great about like, well, here's when to keep your kiddo home. We can really manage all of this in the building. They can rest when they need. I will call you if they have to go home. But sort of bringing that culture back to kids being in school. Talking about meetings with families early in the fall to wrap around any services and supports that we can of people that we already know struggle with that. And even though it's talking about absenteeism, I would also include tardiness, because we have, kiddos that are coming in late. They may be missing a IEP service. They may be missing morning meeting, which is a real community building piece. They may be missing the first part of literacy. And so all of that having an impact, right, on also our proficiency numbers as well. Full school community education around the importance of attendance. There's a website, Attendance Works, I think it's called. But I've already printed off a few things to kind of hand out to folks next week when they come for kindergarten orientation, and talking about that at open house next year, just really building a culture of the importance of attendance and how it can impact the student's future in big ways. And then next summer, I'm bringing a group of staff, like Julianne and Mary were talking about developmental designs. We're going to look to implement that at Green Street. And down here is just a little bit of data around 19.51% of students, so it went down about 4%. Which is 40 total students, had an average days missed of 21 days, which is alarming and significant. So.
And that's prevalent in all of our schools. So this is, thank you, Kate, for articulating the Green Street plan, which sounds terrific. I think we'll be trying to replicate similar approaches at all of our schools next year. And we are now at the final section of the presentation, and it's a shorter section. First, the exciting, I've been reporting out on this for a couple of years at the SU board meetings, but we're increasing public pre-K in Brattleboro, which has been an equity issue when you look across all of the towns in our supervisory union. Historically, we've only offered one public pre-K strand at Oak Grove School. We are moving towards our public pre-K center becoming the Canal Street, so the historic Canal Street School on Canal Street. So I'll leave it there in terms of an intro. Some folks I want to recognize are Mary Kaufman, who will be the principal, is the principal of Canal Street School, was this year, will continue next year. And Carrie Beebe and Brandy Levesque, who've really been leaders in the process of making this happen. Really, we started about 3 years ago, having the conversation to do this. So I'll kick it over to Mary for a few minutes, and then maybe Brandy.
Sure. Really, this has been a team effort to get this pre-K space up and running. It's nice to centralize the location right now. While I love having pre-K kiddos at Oak Grove School, it feels like an Oak Grove classroom and not necessarily a classroom that serves the entire town of Brattleboro, which it does. So this is an opportunity for all of our youngest learners in Brattleboro to come together with a really strong team of educators and special educators to create a really wonderful and robust pre-K program so kiddos are ready when they turn school age. We partner with Head Start currently at Oak Grove, that's been a partnership that's been in place since the classroom opened in 7 years ago. 7 to 8 years ago, something, yeah. This year, our classroom down at Canal Street School was not a collaboration with Head Start, but we are collaborating in both classrooms next year, so that offers opportunities for even more students to receive even more services within our school district and the greater area. We could not have run our classroom at Canal Street this year without partnering with early childhood special education. Randy and her team have been so valuable in making sure that that classroom runs effectively, and also as a place where true inclusion is happening all the time. So I would love for Randy to talk about how that works at our classroom down there now, and the goal for the future. Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I know. Okay. I will try to be brief also, but it's been very exciting. We have a number, I think we might have 9 or 10 students and growing who are not currently enrolled in either one of our community-based programs or a public pre-K, and so we've been trying to find ways to give them opportunities to participate in the classroom and experience what that's like and practice like going to circle or playing on the playground or having a meal with their peers. And so a couple of staff have been running a play group all year at that building. Our early childhood special ed playroom is also in that center, so it really, and we have OT and PT services coming there as well as a number of other things. So, and they've been partnering with Lauren Perlstein to have kids visit the classroom, like I said, and practice those things. That led to a child enrolling in the classroom there, and just they've been now playing at like going outside on the playground, the playgroups on the playground with the whole class that's there right now. So they've just been building lots of opportunities for kids to experience peers and build those social relationships, social skills, all the other skills, and as well as kind of a sense of belonging, of a connection. I belong to some part of our school district, and we're starting that with our 3-year-old, so it's really exciting.
Super. Well, more to come on the developments throughout the next year's school year.
And the invitation always stands. We'd like to come visit the building. It is beautiful inside and out. Harold Wright gets a lot of props for really turning it around.
Yes.
Send me an email. I'll set up a tour. Yeah. And we have openings. We still have openings. If you know any 4-year-olds who need a pre-K spot.
We need a high quality public pre-K
High quality public pre-K. You can reach out to Carrie.
Who's been very instrumental in all of this, so really.
Can you go back? Sorry.
So the category of this last section is really about moving forward and kind of bringing it all together. And as I've sat here tonight, I keep thinking about how quickly we've become more aligned under Mark's leadership, and I just really want to shout that out because we have done that work, and it's been hard work, and it's been really rewarding to hear how proactive we've become instead of reactive. And so this is sort of a little bit more specific about how we're doing some of the proactive pieces of educating and preventing things from getting to a bad level if, social, emotional wise, if kids need support or education. Some of those targeted ways that we're teaching them the social skills. So second step, our counselors have also become really aligned in the past few years. They've had a study group which led to the adoption of second step maybe 5-ish years ago. And that's been going well. It's been implemented not quite universally as a core instruction, but in many schools, in many classrooms, it's being used weekly. And there are 4 categories to each lesson and unit, which focus on growth mindset and goal setting, emotion management, empathy and kindness, and problem solving, and they're differentiated by age group. So that's been a really great resource. Counselors lead the lessons, classroom teachers lead the lessons. The kids like them, they're easy to just kind of put on and teach. You don't have to do a lot of prep. That's sort of a core implementation. We have clinicians in our schools. That's typically accessed through a referral process. It focuses on individual work for kids, individual goals, kids that need a more targeted approach who might be in an acute level of need or an ongoing need, and they, for whatever reason, might not have a therapist out in the community, so they're able to access therapy at school, which has been a game changer for a lot of our kids. They work closely with our behavior support programs as well. They set targeted goals, they incorporate family communication, and it's really, although it can be hard for a kid to step out of class for 30 minutes and go and talk about hard things and then return to class, it also provides an ease of service that is really necessary. Counselors and clinicians lead targeted skills groups, which look a lot of different ways. Lunches. Kids might just think, hey, I'm going to have a fun lunch with a really fun person, but they're doing targeted work within those groups all of the time. They're also going into classrooms and co-teaching with homeroom teachers to have small groups focused on whatever's happening in the classroom. I was able to join a 4th grade class a little bit this spring with our counselor and our assistant principal, Orly Hasfani. We did some work around bullying prevention in that classroom because there were some things rising to the top, and we were able to really squash that and work with the kids on their language and how they interact with one another. And it's just really built within our counseling model. Some of the goals that we have as a counseling group, and I know Bryn just met with counselors as well, is to develop a more regular way to measure sense of belonging and kindness other than Panorama, because K through 2 doesn't take that survey, and that's a big section of elementary school. And have a more regular check-in, like a monthly check-in. So that's to come. Our health offices, I'm continually amazed, and I know it's like this throughout the district. I visited the health office at UHS the other month and was just blown away at like their team and how they approach things. But they're doing everything on Maslow's hierarchy as far as meeting basic needs. Do you have clothes? Do you have whatever? Dental, vision. And then they're teaching skills like self-advocacy and safe body boundaries. I was in the other day, a kid had a splinter and wanted it out but was scared, and the nurses were spending so much time just saying, if you don't want me to touch you, I won't. If you want to do it yourself, here's how you do it. There were options, so it's not, there's just this really healthy support in place that kids need so that they feel safe and they can access, and it's anything from a loose tooth to a splinter to something bigger, like today a kid broke their finger. And it was like, you can put the ice pack on or I can do it for you. But there's always some kind of choice so that there's boundaries being taught, and that's so important with Act 1 and just general safety for our kids. Okay. I tried to fit them all on one slide, but I had to go to 2. The last 2, family involvement. We've put on some workshops this year. There's plans for more. We accessed VAPC and the Women's Freedom Center to come during a school dance at Academy. So they set up in the library and ran some workshops for families who wanted to go check out what resources they had. We focused on social media, safety, and healthy relationship boundaries because the older kids were at the dance. That went well. It wasn't the most highly attended event of the year, but I think as we continue to offer those options, more people will come. We typically at each school have a liaison or 2 that work with families, so they go out and do anything from a taste test at dismissal with the veggie of the month to putting on those workshops, making phone calls about tardiness, anything that has to do with engaging families. And I think that's an important thing to hang on to and keep. School-wide events, we have them all the time, you've heard about them all. And making sure we're offering translation services for families that need them, and also multiple modalities of communication to make sure that if there are non-readers in the family, they're still getting the messages. Lastly, our student leadership teams. The elementary schools have 6th grade leadership, and then throughout middle and high school,
It's been a really strong program in our district for a long time. And we use panorama data with the kids to start off the year and talk about what the areas of need are in the school that they identify. And then we make an action plan with them, so they're really the voice behind what they want to do for the year. They attend a leadership summit in August that starts that planning, and then again in the spring, they go to Landmark, they get to eat in the cafeteria, it's the big highlight. But they go to these workshops that are run by the high school leadership kids, and it's always just incredible, the work that they do and also the facilitation by the high school kids. It's just absolutely impressive. So if you've never been to one, you should check it out. So I always leave there feeling so inspired and encourage our kids to stay in leadership. And it gives them their autonomy and ownership of the school. We've talked about adding 6th graders to our weekly school support team meetings next year, which consists of faculty. And we talk about all the logistics of school events and a lot of different things, but having a student join us is something we've never tried, and we're thinking about trying it. So sort of a step to being on the school board. How can we build in those opportunities for kids? And they do a series of leadership trainings. We meet weekly with our 6th grade leadership teams. So there's always some element of training, whether it's leading a restorative circle or going into a younger classroom to read to kids. There's a lot of built-in ownership, and I think that all comes back to that sense of belonging that's been the common thread that you've heard tonight.
Final couple of clips here. Food service, just to give you an update. Met briefly with Harley Sterling, our director, and Susan this morning, and we're on track in terms of the hiring process for having a fully functional food service school nutrition program. We will have hired most of all of our current staff that have been in place in their schools this school year. So that's really exciting. The one thing that they wanted me to highlight for the community is that top summer priority is the summer food program, food drive, where every Thursday from June 26th to August 14th, there will be a drive-through where free food is available for any child 18 years of age or below. And that's right behind the conference room we're sitting in right now, across the street in that parking lot. So. But we've made great strides, and we're ready to basically open our new program starting this summer. Lastly, we're going to highlight a new program that we're developing for next year.
Yes, so we have a new program coming into Oak Grove School in the fall. We are excited to be able to bring back some students who are currently in out-of-district placement in 3rd through 6th grade. And really the vision for the program is to support students who have pretty intensive social, emotional, and behavioral needs. And we're seeing that when we analyze our outplacement data, that's what we're seeing as a need. We recently, Tate and myself and Jill, who is director within the Vermont Learning Collaborative, and also the teacher, the special education teacher that we've hired, Sam Thatcher, to run this program, recently went to Oak Grove School to a staff meeting and presented this vision and this program and this idea to the staff. And I think it's really a testament to Mary and also to the whole Oak Grove staff that it was really warmly welcomed. That's not something that you might always see in bringing a program like this into a school setting. And so I think that really highlights that it's a great spot for it, and we are really excited to be able to bring some students back, one step closer into our school building. It will be a separate program, and it will absolutely start out that way with the goal long term of having students spend some of the time in the general education setting and then eventually graduating and going back to their home school. So when we think about social emotional learning and sense of belonging, this is probably, one of the most stark examples you can think of, where, we have had to take these students out of our public school settings historically, and now we're really going to work hard to bring them back.
Super. So lastly, in closing, I would just like to say that it's,
We have one more.
Do we have one more? Sorry.
Kevin Drury, secondary special ed.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, it's okay. One of our guiding mandates in special education is least restrictive environment, which is educating students in the general ed setting as much as possible. And our moderate and intensive needs programs this year actually grew by 5 students, which seems like we're going the wrong direction, except that 4 of those are students who came back from outplacement, which is a really nice victory. And also within our moderate program, we went from every single kid in that program spending 100% of their day in a self-contained room to now every single one of them is enrolled in at least one general ed class and one work study program. So we have one student who last year was outplaced out of district at another school, and this year he is spending only 50% of his day in a special ed setting. Next semester he's taking wilderness first aid and CPR. And then going out to a work site after that. And so it's just a lot of victories with our students who have the most intensive needs.
Okay. In closing, I just want to say it's a real honor to work for a supervisory union like the one that we have in place. And I think it's a true testament to the work that's done at the board level to support us in doing the work day in and day out with our students, families, and teaching staff. And I hope you've been able to glean just by hearing all of the different voices tonight how inspiring it is to work with these people and who are so committed to moving us forward. And I think it's a true testament to the different layers of leadership throughout our supervisory union and throughout our buildings. We've been truly invested in leadership and providing opportunities and really enhancing teacher voice and developing teacher leaders. And not every school district does this stuff. So just want to close with that reflection. Thank all of you for your work as school board members and in supporting us and being right there with us. Pretty amazing that we consistently pass budgets because our community understands that as well and honors that. So that concludes our 3rd and final summit of the school year. I think it's been a success in terms of having 3 focus spots where we're all coming together and sharing kind of in-depth how we're all connected in so many ways as a school system. So I believe this sets us up for a really nice retreat on June 24th. We are going to be at the VFW in Brattleboro. So I can send some more confirmation details out around that. But that'll be a full day event as well. And a continued opportunity to hone our collective leadership skills. So, thank you very much.
I think we, as board members, want to thank everyone who works so diligently and so hard with consistency and determination and energy, commitment to every student. So I'm just amazed, yes. I don't know if anybody has any questions at this point as we wrap up. I know we have questions, it's, we have lots of questions. But with a little time to absorb and think about this material. And really this is the groundwork for that important day, June 24th, which is when we really dig into what are our goals for next year at multiple levels. So, thank you. So certainly from the SD side of the house, Madam Chair.
Do we want to keep going?
Do we want, I'm so sorry. Oh, we do want to keep going. Yes.
More on my agenda.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, good grief. And there's more on my agenda.
That was yours.
We don't have anything.
Oh, good grief. I'm so sorry. Oh, yes. Okay, moving through board matters. Looking at the agenda, I'm ready to adjourn the meeting. Legislative updates. Anything to report at this point? I think we're
454 is in a conference committee that there's not much to report right now.
Yeah, and in fact, the VSBA just postponed its webinar on legislative updates, which was tomorrow at 12 noon. They postponed it to, I think, June 20, the same day as graduation. Right, that much I know, yes, the 20th, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so I guess we're all in limbo right now, waiting for the legislature to come back. Any other updates? Any other business? I don't think we need an executive session this evening.
Madam Chair, there being no further business before the SD board, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor on the SD side of the house of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Is there a motion to adjourn, Vernon?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Danielle. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? We are done at 8:17.
And while we're about it, is there a motion to adjourn the SU?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned at 8:18.